Hello and welcome to Lightworks. In this tutorial we're going to have a close look at working with keyframing in Lightworks. In this edit I've picked out each member of the band in a pop concert. What we're going to do is change the shape of each of the regions for the individual band members as the timeline progresses. Let's have a quick run through and we'll break down the layers. Okay, so let's have a look at what we've got. I'm going to turn off all of my tracks apart from the background. In the background I've got a wide shot of the stage. On top of that I've applied a white matte with 50% opacity. On top of that I've added the old movie effect from the colour presets to tint it further and add some scratches and noise to the picture. Then for each member of the band, the lead, bass and the drums, I've given them each a cropped region and I've resized the images as well so we can focus on the performers. As the sequence progresses, each region slowly resizes. There's no fixed pattern to the resize, it's just to add some general interest on the regions. What I'm trying not to do is make the band members overlap at any point. To add additional interest, I've allowed the scratches to burn through using a blend mode, using luminosity. Right the way across the sequence I've added markers every second just to help me step through and build up the keyframe motion. Okay, let's take off all those effects and start from the beginning. So there we are, there's our starting point. We've got the background and then the same shot of the band is duplicated for 3 more layers. We'll crop out each musician in each layer. I've renamed the layers to help me keep track of what's where. To rename a layer, just right click the track header and choose rename. This is the drums track. To drop in the markers every second, use the apostrophe key. I'm going to put one at 0 seconds. Use my master sequence timecode to jump to the first second, then to the second second, and we'll drop in the markers right the way across the whole piece. Okay, let's apply some effects to the background. I'm going to turn off monitoring for the drums, bass and lead. Here's our background. On the background I'm going to apply, right click, add a colour matte. And on the colour matte I'm going to change the colour value to 50% and drop the alpha to about 60%. On top of that I'm going to have the old movie effect, add colour presets, old time movie, and use the following values. I'm going to keep the source video on, scratches amount 67, 0 on the noise, and the origins, the coordinates where the scratches start, 24, 52, 62 and 26. I'm just stepping through these fields using the tab key. So that gives us our nice interesting background. Turning on the lead track, I'm now going to apply a DVE, add standard DVE. Using the crop parameters, I'm just going to crop round the lead singer using left, right, top, bottom cropping. Trimming up those values, I'm going to make him bigger with a master scale, about 1.6, and just reposition the X and Y coordinates to about there. So what we're going to do is the same for each of the other musicians, and the starting point is going to be a nice strip of the performers through the centre of the picture. So now we've got each member of the band positioned with nice bars cropped top and bottom. The last thing I want to do is add a luminosity blend just to add some interest, film scratches running through just this picture in picture. Okay, to do that, on the drums layer, right click, add mixes, blend, luminosity. We get the scratches coming through the picture. Okay, let's get on and keyframe these regions. So what's going to happen as the piece progresses is each region is going to resize. I'm going to try and avoid making them overlap. So I'm going to go back to the top, actually turn off the drums, the bass, focus on the lead, and keyframe this cropping. So back to the lead layer. To enable keyframes for these parameters, you enable or disable them using these icons here, a small stopwatch. I'm going to turn on keyframes for all the crop parameters. To see the keyframe graphs, go to the top right of the Effects Settings panel. I expand the crop entry, left, top, right, bottom. Here's the graphs for each. As I scrub through the piece, you can see the position indicator on the keyframe tracks progressing. Do also note you've got a simple keyframe area down at the bottom here. You can also use that to scrub as well. By default, you'll always have a start and an end keyframe. That's these 2 points here. Currently, there's no change in any of these values. The graphs are horizontal and exactly the same start and end values. So let's go through and keyframe the lead singer. I'm going to return to my Parameters tab. As we move through the timeline and make changes to the crop parameters, we'll be writing those values in the keyframe graphs as we go along. So, starting at the beginning, this is how I want the piece to start. I'm going to use my S key to jump forward to the next marker. Press S on the keyboard. At this point, we're going to go through a thin region and then a shorter and fatter region and alternate between that two. So here, I'm going to make a thin region. So on the top, I'm going to expand the top and the bottom. Make that a bit thinner there on the right, a bit thinner on the left. Next keyframe, this is going to be a short, wider region. Expand the left, shorten the top, shorten the bottom, and extend the right. So as we do this, we're going to start getting some region size jittering as we go along. So the values of these points are arbitrary really, but it's just to add some interest as we progress through the piece. So I have a tall region here, slightly thinner. I'm going to move on and do that to all of these cue points. Okay, so there we go, that's the first one done. Repeat that process, turn on the bass player. The bass tab, expand the crop, turn on the keyframes, and repeat the exact same process. Okay, so that's the bassist done. Finally the drummer. Drums, crop, enable crop keyframes, step to second number 1. First of all, I'm now going to resize the drummer in the first pass, being careful to keep my pictures separated. Quickly go through and perform the same process. Okay, so that's done. So now we've got those regions resizing nicely along the piece. Let's have a look at what's happened on the keyframe tracks. You switch to the keyframe graph mode on the Effects Settings panel. Here's the keyframes that have been written for the drummer. If you want to step previous and next keyframes on specific tracks, you can do that on the left hand side here. You can also step forwards and backwards on the keyframes using the master keyframe track for the video segment. You can zoom in and out on the keyframe graph using the plus and the minus magnifying glass. And you can also drag the edges of the display. So looking at the keyframe tracks for each individual keyframe's parameter, there's a couple of problems in what I've written. I'd like to fix those up now. As we get to about here, the gap between the lead and the drums becomes a bit too large. I'm trying to keep the distance between each of the three pictures roughly the same. So we need to make a correction in this region here. I want to fix this up, and that's the left hand border value of the drums. Go to the crop left. I'm going to use my step, previous and next keyframe jump buttons to move to where I think the problem is. Here it's okay. If I jump to the next keyframe, looking at the left hand crop of the drummer, it's not. To move that value in the graph mode, select the keyframe, and I can actually use the mouse wheel to modify the value by scrolling. I just drop that down a couple of notches to about 27%. That's where I want it. That's okay. That's okay. I jump to the next one, and that's okay as well. I'll just scrub through that slowly, and that's fixed the distance between the two pictures correctly. The next problem I want to have a look at is right down the end on the lead vocalist. From this keyframe here to the end, he's right off the frame. Now I can modify a group of keyframes all in one go by clicking and dragging and lassoing a group. Now, in the same way that we modified a single keyframe, I can either click and drag upwards or use the mouse wheel again. Just modify those points. You can see that crop position comes in for the whole group, and that's what we want. If you want to change all these values by clicking and dragging but keep the keyframes locked in position, try using a modifier. What I'm going to do is hold down the shift key and click and drag upwards to move the crop value. I'm unable to move the keyframes left and right. This is a really handy modifier. So that last group, I'm going to try and keep them, keep a nice little border on the edge here. Now you'll notice that all of the lines of transfer between every keyframe is just a straight line. In some cases you might want to smooth this over using a curve to ease the settings in and out. What I'm going to do is keep the movement for any crops left and right as a straight line linear transfer, but for all the movement going up and down on the bottom and the top crops, I want to smooth that over with a curve so it appears to be a bit less jerky. I'm going to do this on each of the three pictures. To change the transfer mode for the whole of the graph, hold down the shift key and click, selecting the top track for the drums and the bottom crop for the drums, holding shift, click. We've now added this nice smooth curve on all the transfers here. I'm going to ease in and ease out the top and the bottom crop settings on each of the pictures. So that contrast between the ease in and ease out on the top and the bottom crops and the linear transfer of the right and the left has made the whole piece a lot smoother rather than a bit of a jerky resizing which we had. Let's go back to the sliders view. Go to the top of the piece and open up the crops again. Now you may want to find you refine the keyframe process further. The way to do that is to start adding keyframes between the points you've already added keyframing. So, for example, if I just zoom the timeline here, I can start making some adjustments in between the marker points where we set the master keyframe values. So if I go in between the first marker here, I'm just going to start adding a touch of changes to the top and the bottom so the jitter becomes a bit more randomized between the next two markers. I'm going to repeat that for all tracks right the way across the piece. Finally, I'm just going to add a couple of extra keyframes on the background track. Go to my background tab. I want to keyframe the scratch amount. I'm going to turn that on, turn to the top of the piece, and the scratch value affects this. So we've got a few scratches, or lots of scratches. We're just going to cycle through that as the piece goes on. So from the top, not too many, about a quarter of the way through, increase that, halfway through, increase that there, 3/4, decrease it slightly, one more near the end, just to give those scratch values some changes. Of course you can go through, keyframe any of these other values. To the keyframe track. So looking at the keyframe graph for the scratch amount on the old time movie effect, we do have this linear transfer. What I actually want to do is just ease in this first 2 keyframes, go back to linear transfer, and then ease out on the last 2 keyframes, just to smooth that in and out of the effect adjustment. If you want to change the transfer between 2 keyframes, put the mouse between them, hold down Control and click. And the same at the front here. Hold down Control and click. Now we curve in and we smoothly curve out. Okay, let's give that a run through with those changes. So I hope that's helpful and you enjoy taking your effects to a new level with keyframes. Thanks for watching.